I decided to choose the creative project and wanted to focus on the architecture and art that was created in the Gothic era for the Chartres Cathedral in France. I created two artworks. First is the gouache painting on watercolor paper. This details the north transept of the cathedral, giving a larger, long-distance view of the entire structure. I wanted to include the flying buttresses on the right side of the painting, the large rose window on the north facade, lancet windows, and many pointed arches, which were all key elements in Gothic architecture. For my second artwork, I created a pen drawing of the west facade of the cathedral. This image was drawn on watercolor paper as well, using a micron Pitt pen in order to show more detail in the architecture. Here I have drawn the rose window in between two towering steeples with the royal portal drawn underneath. Intricate stained glass is represented on the rose window and lancet windows, while pointed arches, crosses, and entryways are shown around them. The Chartres Cathedral was one of the earlier cathedrals made in the Gothic era in the Middle Ages and was very ambitious. Three major shifts that changed in architecture leading into the Gothic style were the perfection of the ribbed vault, with vaults shifting from groin to rib with thinner structures, the new use of the pointed arch, which became very helpful for allowing more space for stained glass windows while using less stone, and the shift from buttresses to flying buttresses, which allowed the walls to be free in order to use more glass. The Chartres Cathedral was known for its extravagant windows, vibrant stained glass, and its extremely deep entry portals that stood out against other Gothic cathedrals. The Chartres has an entire window dedicated to Charlemagne that tells his life story. The north transept rose window, shown in the gouache painting, portrays the Virgin and Child surrounded by 4 doves and 8 angels. Chartres Cathedral is unique in that much of the stained glass that was put in place in the 12th century still remains intact and with full color today. Stained glass was included all around the cathedral in rose windows as well as the lancet windows. On the west facade, the 3 main lancet windows portray the life of Christ. Showing narratives and artwork on stained glass was a very important element in the cathedral. The makers of the windows experimented with scenes and colors that were used, with Chartres blue even going down in history for its innovative color usage. Chartres was known for its sculptural elements. It was able to take its decorative elements and combine them with structural in order to appear even more grandiose. Along some of the columns of the cathedrals, figures were sculpted in an elongated style to fit onto as much of the column as possible, shown in the bottom entryway on the Pitt pen drawing. This is one of the ways the Chartres Cathedral was able to incorporate art into architecture and design while keeping the sculpture as a natural part of the building. On the west facade, as shown in my pen drawing, the royal portal has gone through many exposures to incidents of fire, touristry, and lightning, yet still remains even when the rest of the surrounding structure did not. This is a testament to how strong and how much work went into creating this portal. The elongated figures act as the columns that frame the massive doorways. Lintels are decorated with figures standing underneath the arcade, while all remaining clear and clean in their compositions around the entry portal. Vaulted ceilings were becoming popular in the 11th century as people were realizing that they were structurally stronger than simple wooden roofs. The problem with these ceilings was the weight of them and the outward push on the surrounding walls, so the solution was to actually make the vault heavier and counteract the thrust by placing external buttresses. This was a lot of work and required too much material, so eventually barrel vaults were crossed with transverse ribs, which helped with the outward push by dispersing it, allowing for larger windows to be used for the walls. Towards the beginning of the 12th century, architects began to innovate a new system of design by spanning 2 diagonal arches across each other, which became the beginning of the pointed arch. The innovation that made French architecture known for being inventive was the inverting of the parts used for the pointed arches. After the pointed arch came the flying buttresses and the transition of groin to rib vaults. There were three major advances made during this time period that became staples of Gothic architecture and changes. Firstly, flying buttresses allowed for tribune galleries to be removed. Next was the embedding of arches into the wall of the ribbed vault to allow a more elegant design referred to as the formeret rib, which made walls lighter and easier to pierce with windows. And lastly, flying buttresses allowed for another useful aspect of helping discharge rainfall. This made it possible to open up the blind triforium wall. In my gouache painting, you can see on the right side where I wanted to portray the use of flying buttresses in helping the structure stand. Architecture of Gothic cathedrals had cleaned up the issues that had arisen in previous structures and was characterized by having more balance, being more harmonious, and having more order to their appearances. The architects purposely focused on simplifying and bringing clarity into elements that had not had these features in previous centuries. The Chartres Cathedral was an important structure in history because it was ever-changing and could be used as a model for other builders throughout Europe, especially France. Its design influenced the making of cathedrals such as the Cathedral of Reims and the Cathedral of Amiens. Pointed arches in the cathedral allowed for diagonal and transverse ribbed vaults to connect, as well as let more light in through the larger windows. The clerestory arcade of the church contrasts the more horizontal features that help lead the viewer's eye upward. I chose to use the Chartres Cathedral for my project because of how important it was in medieval history and how it became a landmark for Gothic architecture. I learned a lot about what went into creating this structure and how it helped to shape art and architecture not only in this time period, but for many years afterwards.